pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for January 10th, 2018. On the line with us right now, of course, Duane Rollins, and I'm Kevin Laramee. We have Jorge Sanchez, coach of Concordia's Women's Stingers program, to talk today about an issue that's been in the news in Canadian soccer over the last few days. John Herdman taking over in the men's national team, switching from the women's to the men. George, how you doing this morning?
Great, and yourself?
We're good, George. And look, I guess I'm going to start with this. Amongst the women's soccer community out there, there's been a certain aspect of them that are a little frustrated by this decision. That they think that John Herdman has sort of betrayed, might be a strong word, but those are kind of the words they're using, the women's game by moving to the men's game and sort of undermining its importance. Do you think that that's a fair take, that he shouldn't have left the women's game, or do you think that soccer should be just viewed as soccer?
I think, I don't know if betrayed is the right word. I think it was a bit of a surprise. I'm seeing as how he came here primarily to coach the women's program and all the great work he's done since he came on board in 2012. And sort of out of the blue, he decides he's going to coach the men's program, or he's asked to coach the men's program, depending on who you speak to. So is it a surprise? Maybe people who were in the inner circle knew that he had aspirations to move on into the men's game. It's disappointing in that he's done such a good work, and everybody sort of knew he was going to probably leave after 2019 World Cup or after the 2020 Olympics, and it's like he's leaving just a little short of the final goal.
Fair enough. You are someone who's coached in the women's game for a long time. Can you sort of speak as coach what your philosophy is and how you treat, if you treat the women any differently, and when you coach women to how you might approach a men's coaching situation?
I've always said that I try and coach sort of gender blind. I don't see them as female soccer players. I see them as athletes primarily. I think as a coach, you adapt to the group that you have in front of you, whether you're coaching at the club level, at the select, at the university, at the national program. Each group is different. So I see moving from the men's program to the women's program, or vice versa, is strictly another case of having to adapt to a specific group. For sure, there are some stereotypical differences. And, the biggest reality is now Coach Herdman's going to be working with professional athletes. On the women's program, you have a mix of players who are making a career of soccer, players who are at the university level. I mean, he's brought up youth players who are still in high school. Now on the men's program, he's primarily going to be working with people whose primary profession is that of soccer player. So the dynamic's going to be a little different. The way he communicates is going to be a little different. The way he tries to sell his program is going to be a little different. But at the end of the day, a competent leader of a group is a competent leader of a group.
One thing I was talking about yesterday, George, is people are people. So for John Herdman's skill set of managing the women's national team, individual people in this national team, bring them together with a common goal, common purpose, that is translatable. Can you see those skill set being used properly on the men's side for John Herdman?
For sure. I last night, ironically, I made a tweet somewhat tongue-in-cheek, and I said, if I've been a manager in the workplace of a department that only has women, does that mean I can never manage a department that has men in it? And I find it's something that really applies to coaching. For sure, the way he's going to interact with the athletes one-on-one or as a group is going to be much different. The female athlete, typically, not in all cases, it's more about the connection, about, understanding the role in the big picture. Sometimes male athletes are a little more task-oriented. You don't have to coddle them in the same way. You don't have to pass the message in the same way. And it's just about, this is what I need, this is how we're going to get there, and we move forward. I've heard John Herdman speak, and I was ready to play for him in a presentation he did. He's an inspirational speaker. He's got a clear vision of what he expects. He knows how to plan things out. That's translatable to men or women.
One thing that I'm wondering as well, George, is we've seen the reaction of Christine St. Clair online on Twitter after the announcement, just literally replying to the announcement, "I'm speechless right now. We've heard of details of women's players and men's players not being aware of this situation and learning on social media and on TSN and on Sportsnet and anywhere they get their news, where they learn about their new coach or losing their coach." Does that aspect give a different taste for that player, or a different view of the national team? Could there be a sense of betrayal? And I'm not just talking about on the pro side. I'm talking about even players in the university level that are aspiring to play for the national team, seeing things like this unfold in the public in front of everyone. Is there a danger of feeling betrayed as a player?
I think specifically about Christine Sinclair, I actually just saw a tweet this morning where she said, just to clarify, he did speak to me before making the change, but I'm still speechless.
Oh, there you go.
I think it's the way it came about. All of a sudden, there was one tweet saying that he was switching over, and then a few other tweets, and then Canada Soccer came and made the announcement. I think it was the timing and the way it was done that's more of a surprise than the actual change. You hire a men's coach 10 months ago, give him a 4-year contract. He hasn't really played any major competitions, the Gold Cup arguably, and all of a sudden he's gone sort of out of the blue for the public. Insiders maybe have a different perception. I think that's the reality of society today. We get news through social media. That's where we find out what's happening in the world more often than not. So the fact that the news broke on social media isn't much a surprise. It's how quickly the decision seemed to come and the surprise of it. Because John Herdman is seen as the person. When he came on board in 2012, most of the senior athletes on that team were ready to quit women's program. Christine Sinclair, he always says in his presentation, John says, when I came on board, the program was broken. He brought that from last place at the World Cup in 2011 to double bronze medals. He did so much. He's associated with the women's program, but he's a coach. He has a chance to coach a men's national program. And the reality is, it's kind of a no-lose situation for him. It can't be worse. Canada's ranked 94th on the men's side behind some much smaller countries. Any incremental improvement he does, he's going to look like the guy who got us going forward. The women's program, he's done such a great job of putting a strong foundation in place that the person they've put in the role for now, he's going to do well. So he's going to be known as the one who saved the women's program, and he could be now known as the one who makes the men's program move forward. He'll have a great legacy in Canada soccer.
A lot of people that are listening to this probably don't remember Marache's reign in charge and how that ended. The vision of that Nigeria game at the end of that World Cup is something that's burned in my head. So yeah, John Herdman deserves a lot of credit for what he did to take a program that seemed like it was dead in the water at that point. So I'll put that out there. But to move to my question, he never played the game. This is a sentence that keeps popping in my head, and imagine being an athlete that is going to be playing under John Herdman right now, coming in and seeing this guy that came in from the women's game, that did not play the game at a high level, that's been a professional coach his entire career. And those guys, they believe in that stuff. They don't respect people instinctively that didn't play the game at an elite level. So how does John Herdman, in your mind, overcome that perception that he just can't possibly understand what it's like to be a professional male footballer?
Well, I'll answer the question two ways, because I know people have questioned his qualifications or his competency. We had two coaches prior in Flores and Zambrano with a CV filled of competency. Flores had coached Real Madrid and all these other clubs and countries. How well did they do? So having the qualifications on paper doesn't guarantee success. We've seen that with the last 10 years worth of coaches. Now, how does he get on board? Surrounding himself with players who believe in what he's trying to do, or former players who can go into the coaching ranks as assistants, who believe in what he's trying to do and become the ambassadors and the mouthpiece to his plan. He doesn't have to teach the players how to play. He has to have them believe in a plan. The execution can be done by a competent coaching staff. One could argue, as a male coaching females, how does a female relate to a male? It's the same thing. How do I get women to believe in what I'm telling them? Their easy answer would say, well, you don't know what it's like to be a female. So it's the same thing. For me, it's the same thing. is that you adapt to the group in front of you, you're clear in your communication, you have a clear and concise plan, and you have checkpoints that get incremental successes. Because at the end of the day, a professional athlete wants to win. If there's success, the players will do what's asked.
Tactically speaking, George, is there any difference between how you manage men and women? There have been people out there that are sort of arguing that the women's game is more physical, more this, more that. Is there any tactical adjustments you think that John Herdman will need to make as he approaches the men's game?
Yes. I think one of the things John Herdman really changed about women's soccer in Canada is made it much more dynamic. Going back to Evan's day, and Evan Pelleru had a Route 1 type soccer. It was all long balls and play on athleticism of the athletes. Marachi came in and tried to play soccer, but at the end she says, no, they're just athletes. I can't teach them anything. One of the things Herdman did was teach the players to be tactically responsible on the field. He said, here's the tools. Now it's up to use them. And there'd be games where he'd say, you decide the formation. You change formations in the middle of the game. There's realities. The competitive experience on the men's side, they play in high-level games as pros much more often. So they have to adjust tactically to different setups. They have to adjust tactically to players that can hit a ball 60 yards, whereas not every woman can hit a ball 60 yards to beat an offside trap or to beat a high press. So there are adjustments you make. But at the end of the day, if you have a coaching background and you know the game of soccer, again, you're just adapting to the tools that you have at your disposal.
Coach, one thing I'm wondering is on a day-to-day basis, running a practice session, men versus women, literally that aspect of managing a team, is it different? Do you run a practice differently for a men's side or a women's side? Is it the same type of exercises, same type of drills of length, same type of time with the ball at their feet? What can you tell us when you compare a men's training session versus a women's training session, if there is any difference?
I don't think that the differences in training sessions are really primarily based on gender. They're based on the level that you're coaching at. And they, are you in preseason? Are you in leading up to a big competition? Are you in a friendly camp? I think how you plan a training session is dependent on where you are in your competitive cycle. So if you're getting ready for a World Cup qualifying against a known opponent, your sessions are going to be based on tactically preparing for that game. If you're holding a training camp 2 years away from your next very highly competitive game, maybe you're using younger players. So I don't think that the length of a practice, I don't think the type of drills you do are gender dependent. It's really is, what is the goal that you're trying to accomplish in that training session? How does that fit into the longer term picture? And I think that's where John Herdman's going to really be successful. He's proven that he knows how to plan ahead. He won a bronze medal in England in 2012, and he didn't sit on his laurels. He already started thinking ahead to the next World Cup and the next Olympics and finding younger players and understanding that a third of the team might be moving on and will be too old, so I have to replace them right away. And you see it. You see how he's not afraid to bring 16, 17-year-olds into the national program and give them a chance to play. That's what we need in Canada. We need someone on the men's side who's going to push the boundaries a little bit and find new players, challenge. Zambrano did it a little bit at the beginning of his reign. Something didn't work. Something made them decide to change him.
George, a lot of people on the women's side of the game are looking at this as a loss for the women's side, that this is just another blow to the respect that the women's game gets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I wonder, however, whether there's an opportunity here, whether you think if John Herdman is successful with the Canadian men's national team, that this might actually be a positive thing for the women's game to have a guy move from the women's to the men's and show that he can do that. Not to put more value on the men's side, but just this idea that soccer is soccer. Is there a positive here?
Change always has opportunities for positive outcomes, always. I think the reality is the women now who have been coached by John since 2012 will now get to experience a new head coach, someone who comes in new. Yes, I think the fact that John Herdman, who's been his entire career a coach of female soccer, moving into the men's program, if he has success, it's going to send a huge message that says, if you know the game, whether you coach men or women, you can be successful. It's one of the barriers. I've only coached women for the last 27 years. Not so much anymore do I hear these comments, but I always got told that, well, you have to coach women because you're not qualified to coach men. And I think having a high-profile individual like John Herdman being successful transitioning from women to men will just send a message that if you're a good coach, you're a good coach. End of story.
We've talked to Jorge Sanchez, the coach. I'm going to talk to Jorge Sanchez, the Canadian soccer fan, to finish the interview today. George, what was your first impression when you saw this unfold on Monday night? Were you thinking, or maybe I shouldn't put words in your mouth, but was it just same old Canadian soccer? What was your thought on Monday night?
I'd say if I'm talking as a fan of women's soccer, it was shock, like pretty much anybody. If I'm talking as a general fan of Canadian soccer, it's, wow, another knee-jerk reaction to a situation. And unfortunately, we don't have the full story. And I think that's what's fueling a lot of the comments and disappointments and reactions. You know, you hear everything from Canada Soccer wasn't happening with Zambrano and wanted a new coach, but took someone they know. You hear other people saying it's because John Herdman threatened to leave and they didn't want to lose him, so they got rid of Zambrano, even though they kind of like him because they wanted to keep John Herdman and they made a choice. We don't know the full story. So I was both shocked. I was both not surprised because Canada has been known to make knee-jerk reactions over the last 20 years, 30 years in men's soccer side. But again, I've chosen many times to be an optimist, and I find that when there's change, there's always an opportunity to improve. I think it's exciting. Having known John Herdman a little bit, having seen him speak, having coached players when they were youth players and been in touch with them and seen how they've been influenced by John Herdman, I have a feeling that he's going to do something different, and different sometimes is good. And I believe it until I'm proven wrong. I believe that he's going to do something really great for women's soccer, he's going to do something great for men's soccer like he did on the women's side.
George, it's January 10th. What's going on with the Concordia Stingers? What's next in the agenda in this offseason?
Well, we're just starting our winter semester training. We're fortunate enough in our conference that we get to play a competitive league through the winter semester at various indoor facilities. So we get to continue playing 11 on 11. And this Friday, we're holding our recruitment day. It's a big event where we bring in athletes from various CJEPs and high schools in Ontario, and we bring them in to spend the day at a type of open house and have presentations about the school and the athletics program and a little training session. So recruiting is in high gear, and with the current players, we're starting to get into training again and start building for next fall.
Coach Jorge Sanchez, head coach of the Concordia women's soccer team Stingers, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me on.
We'll be right back after the break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. Duane, busy last few days in Canadian soccer. You can still color me kind of shocked, and you can still trying to grasp what's been going on the last few days. Our numbers are saying the same thing. People are wondering what's going on, what will be going on in the next few weeks.
Well, yeah, for sure. And look, the longer this goes, the more at peace I am with the idea that John Herdman's going to get a chance to prove things at the men's national team level. My concerns, my trepidation continues to be associated with what this is going to mean to the women's side of the game. And I was glad to talk to George today. And when I booked him yesterday, I was thankful that we were having the opportunity to talk to someone who sort of has the same perspective that Herdman will have, and that he's a man that coaches the women's game, right?
Involved in the highest level of women's soccer in this country. Like, this is how university sports, U Sports, formerly known as the CIS, the artist formerly known as the CIS.
Don't get me going on that. CIS, go ahead.
Yeah, but it's the highest level of women's soccer right now in this country. So when you're involved at that level, with women as well for the last 27 years, you get a certain perspective that we're never going to have, and you view things a little bit more balanced, a little bit more equal. And I'm feeling a lot better after talking to to Coach Jorge Sanchez about Herdman on the men's side. And, you know, one thing I never thought about is how this could maybe legitimize a bit the job that he made with the women's national team when you compare things. And we shouldn't compare things. In life, we compare way too many things. We shouldn't. But when we do...
I think I said the...
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I said the phrase "soccer is soccer" about twice in that interview, and I think that's what I want to underline that. And this is how I've always approached covering the women's national team, and I've gotten in trouble for that sometimes because there are people out there that believe, and I believe this is every bit as sexist as someone who says that you know that the women's game's not worth following. There are people out there who say that's clearly sexist, overtly sexist. But I believe this idea that you have to treat the women's game differently and with kid gloves is, you know, that's casual sexism. I've always thought that. And I think this idea that you can't move from the women's game to the men's game, it really speaks to that sort of idea that there's this ghettoization that is almost self-imposed in some people's mind that I think that we need to get over. We need to stop thinking about John Herdman betraying the women's game in this particular case, rather than just moving on to a new challenge. And it's the same game. He's just coaching men now.
How about he represents the women's game now? You know, his success, if there is, well, let's be fair. If there is success for him on the Canadian men's national team side, well, it might open doors for more coaches. It might actually open door too to maybe a woman coach to make the transition. And that's totally another discussion. But again, soccer is soccer, and people are people. So if this works, maybe it actually does open doors for other coaches.
And I want to be clear about this. We're talking about opening opportunities. This is my mind, and I'm being very careful in how I say this. I'm not suggesting that there's an opportunity to move up, quote unquote, up from the women's game to the men's game. I'm saying that there's an opportunity to move into other opportunities within the same game. And you're just expanding your job field, your places that you're searching at this point. And it should work the other way too. That you know, why could a guy that's or a woman that's coached at the men's level for their entire career, and I say guy because let's face it, most of them are, move into the women's game equally. That happens now a little bit more than the other way around. So ultimately, we want to just have good coaches go to the best position for them, regardless of gender. And I think that would be an ideal. And if John Herdman does well here, and he's a trailblazer in many ways in this particular case, then yeah, absolutely, it's going to open eyes and expand the people that you're looking at to fill your positions. And I think that should go both ways. So this isn't about one being better than the other. It's just being about opening up more opportunities for more people.
Now, I want to switch gears here before we wrap the show for today, Duane, and I want to talk a little bit about you. We've been talking about Canada all week long. Let's talk about the United States for a second. One of the news that has been not paid attention enough by us the last few days because of the whole Herdman-Zambrano Canada situation is Jonathan Gonzalez choosing Mexico instead of the United States. And one of the factors that led to this decision by Gonzalez is a few years ago, Klinsmann didn't call upon him when it was kind of time and kind of got aggravated by it, and that kind of led the door open for the Mexicans to come in, ask for a call-up, and he answers that call. You do have that same situation happening in Canada too, and one of the reasons why Zambrano's not here anymore. But let's face it, Jonathan Gonzalez choosing Mexico doesn't go well. It doesn't start 2018 the right way for our U.S. men's national team fans.
Well, no, and look, I think that Klinsmann not calling him in, him not getting called for the Portland friendly, even though Portugal.
Yeah, POR. I know it's confusing. It's like PDX, it's like
Portland
Phoenix.
Timbers were available for friendly at the same time, I believe. But at any rate, no, all these things played a role. But I think the biggest role when you're talking about the Gonzalez situation is the fact that Mexico is going to the World Cup next year. This year, I should say. This year.
This year. It's 2018.
The United States.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. My God. Jeez. And we're gonna have to do daily coverage for that, aren't we? Anyway.
Well, we are
I'm
going
tired
to.
Already.
And patreon.com/sportspodcasting network. Your help goes a long way, especially with the new setup that you're seeing now. You can hear me nicely. You can hear myself very well. You can't really hear Duane properly, and we want to fix that. And patreon.com/sportspodcasting network can help us remediate this situation and get us both on an audio setup that could be beneficial to all our ears. So to give us a hand and give us a chance to up the production values even more. Patreon.com/sportspodcasting network. All of you.
And we'll get better interviews. We'll get more time if you support. Look, support independent media out there. But there's not a lot of us doing this stuff out there. And I'm not trying to get rich doing this. I'm just trying to be able to do it the properly way I want to do it. At any rate, Kevin, go on.
But you're right, and we're one of the only places left where we choose what we talk about. We choose the way to talk about it, and we're trying to stay objective when it's time to stay objective, and we get our networks of contacts. We are vetting stories. We're doing independent journalism here, and there's not a lot of places left that does independent journalism. And with your help, we could do more. I can only start to begin to imagine if we had a few $1,000s a month on Patreon, the amount of writers, the amount of contacts of people I can bring on board with us on a full-time basis to continue. You've seen the layoffs in the world of soccer and sports media over the last 2 years. Imagine if we had the budget to actually hire the people we had on the show before, to actually hire ourselves, first of all, too. We could do a lot of great things for the beautiful game right here, right now. And with your help, we can do those things.
And maybe go back to do some of those shows that we've had to let go over the past couple of years as well, to provide that coverage. But at any rate, to go back to Gonzalez, Kevin, so that we're not just talking about ourselves. Look, this is a guy that was heavily pulled in two directions, and as I get older, I become a little more tolerant of this split loyalty thing, except for Owen Hargraves. Screw Owen Hargraves.
Owen.
He will always.
He broke out.
At any rate.
That was personal.
I get a little more.
Because the Hargrave is personal.
Jonathan
de Guzman, I'm looking at you too.
Everyone remembers the first time your girlfriend or boyfriend broke up with you, right? So,
our first. We always remember our first, don't you? A long time ago. But.
Yeah, exactly. So, other than Hargraves, I kind of am a little more tolerant of this because I understand that there's torn loyalties. And look, I mean, I'm good friends with people that have nationalities that are, heritage and ethnicity that's confusing, I guess, basically.
Yeah.
So I get that this dual loyalty thing. So I get that, and he certainly had that going on there. And I'm not an American, so I can kind of look at this a little more objectively than maybe a hardcore U.S. men's national team fan might. But look, I think that really when you boil this down, the bottom line is that the fact that if the U.S. is going to the World Cup this summer, I think he probably would have stayed because everything I understand about him and his background and the fact that he represented the United States at the youth level so often is that he felt American, but the opportunity to play in a World Cup and looking ahead, 2022, especially when you're young, to look ahead 6 years, 5 years.
Well,
that's too long, man.
Not just that.
Play now.
You're guaranteed 2018. I don't know if he's going to play in that World Cup, if he's going to be one of the guys selected for it, but there's that opportunity. There's 2022, and there's 2026, where Mexico are pretty much guaranteed to be in the World Cup anyways because they're part of that united bid with Canada and the United States. So if you're Jonathan Gonzalez, looking at your next 8 years, 3 World Cup in those 8 years, and you have a decent chance of playing in for sure 2, maybe 3 of those if the career and everything goes on the right path. You never know when an injury comes in and changes situation. Looking 6-8 years down the road is difficult as a pro athlete, no matter what level you are. But being in his shoes, I don't know if I wouldn't take the same decision. Just looking at it pragmatically, almost being assured to play with a decent team around you, surrounding you, at 2, if not 3 World Cup if he's chosen this summer.
No, precisely. And I don't think there's any mystery beyond what we just said to this decision. It's an opportunity for him. It's the best, take a step away, look at it sort of logically, and it was the logical move for him to make at this particular time. If in fact it happens, it hasn't been officially confirmed yet, but although all signs point.
Oh yeah, and even Tom Marshall, Mexico World Cup on Twitter, been on the show many times. Friend of the show, Tom Marshall, ESPN-FC in Guadalajara in Mexico. Even him is talking about how it's almost a done deal, and he's been told by very well placed sources that it's done.
Yeah, exactly. So final thought on this, just to get back to Patreon for a sec. Mexican football, we don't cover it a lot. we would love to cover it a lot. So if you want to support us, and we'll cover Mexican football more too. So lots of things you can do. Patreon.com/Sports Podcasting Network. Kevin, on that note, I'm going to say goodbye. You, as always, can close the show.
You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute. And I hope you appreciated the show today, the audio version and the live version. Should have gone a lot more smoothly. You can see on the video version, I have a brand new microphone here and a brand new way to broadcast and have Duane on the line, so there was no more buzzing. And even though Duane's on the phone, you can hear Duane a lot more clearer, if that is a word, today. And you can follow Duane at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. And as always, until tomorrow, with a special 5 rings and a Soccer Today portion tomorrow. With a great friend of the show as well. Well, until then, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.